Don and I disagree about many things in general, but not too many things motorcycling. However, one of our biggest disagreements has always been KTM's Super Duke R, the 1290. The Beast, as the KTM factory so confidently called it back at its launch in 2014. He thinks it's the best naked bike ever made, or at least he did. And it was all because of that bonkers engine, which used to lead the way in the power stakes. And it was a V-twin to boot, which means its power was just better. I too loved the engine, but being older and wiser, much wiser, I need a bike to offer more than just an amazing engine to proclaim it the true leader of a class. That's why I've always, overall, and just by the smallest of margins mind you, preferred Aprilia's V4 Tuono. Just as much power, if not obviously as much torque, a more refined delivery of that power, and a chassis that was also more capable, more precise, more accurate. It was a James Bond kind of assassin next to a Rambo-esque Special Forces psycho. Lots of dead bodies either way, but it's just that one piles them up in a lot more classy and distinctively stylish way than the other. KTM has just released version 3 of the Beast in South Africa. And Don took it to a track and, unsurprisingly, absolutely loved it. The thing is, he says it's now good enough for me to finally admit that the Aprilia is the lesser bike. I'm intrigued by his recommendation, but not entirely convinced, which is why I'm on top of a mountain between Germany and Austria, faced by a road that is, quite frankly, rather scary. In such a demanding environment, with a bike that its creators have dubbed the Beast, I'm going to need a lot more than the previous model's savage performance. I'm going to need a chassis that gives me more confidence than it ever did, and a power delivery that can caress as well as slap me across the chops with a brutal backhander. This is version 3 of the Beast, and although, like any good update, it has had a range of improvements across the board, I'm primarily interested in what's happened to the chassis. At first glance there doesn't appear to be any huge changes, but if you peer a little closer then the details begin to emerge. The frame now has thicker tubes, and with the engine as a stress member, the whole thing is a massive 3 times stiffer than it was. And it's lighter too, as is the new subframe. There's also now a linkage on the rear shock and a stronger swing arm with a higher pivot point. Lots of little changes, including to overall geometry with a longer wheelbase now part of the package. And how do all these tweaks feel on the road? Well, even at a gentle, looking at the amazing scenery kind of pace, there's definitely a greater sense of refinement, even to the way the throttle works. Gentle measured inputs on the throttle equals gentle measured results in the real world, where, to be honest, in the past, it could often be just a little bit too brutal. Even though I'm not going at a mad pace because the runoff is, it's run off the side of a mountain, it does feel a little bit more assuring than it used to. Find the right corner exit, give it a bit of throttle, and it just feels, I don't know, a bit more planted, a bit more accurate, a little less brutal, which the previous models could be, rather in your face, on or off. And this, it feels a little bit more like the Beast wants to be your friend. Okay, a bit of a leery friend, but still. That isn't entirely down to the chassis either, because although this legendary engine essentially kicks out the same power and torque, it too seems to have learned some manners. As with the chassis, there's been a load of little changes, but it's worth mentioning, I think, that the ram air feed is directly through the headstock into a new airbox. And there's the addition of top-mounted injectors to give a better fuel and air mix right through the rev range. Lots of lightening of components, a new exhaust with fatter headers, and the peak of 177 brake horsepower is now up by, well, just less than a smidgen, and the 140 newton meters of torque is pretty much as it was.
If that all sounds too boringly nice for a bike that made its beastly legend because of its monster V-twin, then don't worry, because this is still one insanely, hilariously, ridiculously, stupidly quick marathon go. The power is deeply impressive, but it's the torque that keeps you coming back for more. It's just got this addictive hit, no matter what the revs are. And it really doesn't matter what the revs are, because even at 3,500 RPM, this thing is making 100 newton meters of torque, and that's a lot. So, unless you're chasing lap times, you might as well just ignore the gearbox and the revs and wind on the throttle no matter where you are, because you'll always be rewarded with some instant blurring of the scenery. Honestly, what a silly engine. I love it.
Not that the gearbox is a thing to be ignored, since it too is now improved with a sweeter, more gentle quick shift action both up and down the ratios. The electronics as a whole have been improved, especially the traction control that has gained a level of sophistication it previously lacked. Even riding gods like Jeremy McWilliams use the lesser settings to go quicker at the track, rather than turning it off completely. The same sort of improvements have been included in the ABS and its ability to include lean angle in its calculations. I'm glad of this because the last time I rode the Super Duke, this happened. I wasn't going too quickly, I wasn't offline, and it was at the end of a day at the track. Unfortunately, shocked and tired as I was, I never checked the track condition, so I couldn't really blame the KTM's brakes much as I wanted to. Thankfully, that sort of thing hasn't happened on this test, and at no point did I ever really feel like it was going to either. Look, to be fair, I haven't exactly been riding like I was auditioning for a team to go to the Isle of Man, but there again, at times I wasn't hanging around too much either, so it is testament to the improvements made to this bike that I felt totally confident, totally reassured all the time. This is then one of those updates that you can really feel. It has turned the beast into a beast with manners, and that means that it's a significant improvement as far as I'm concerned.
So Don's bound to ask me, have I changed my mind? Have the improvements had that much of effect on the KTM? To which I can only reply, goodbye Aprilia. Hello KTM!